All right, we have our binding completely pressed, ready to go. I have it on my little spool like we talked about. It's all pinned, it's set up. I couldn't work on it last night. We're ready to go now. I also have the quilt. If you'll notice, the back side is facing up and I am in the middle area of the quilt. Here's the end of the quilt and I've draped the middle area over, because what we're going to do is we're going to stitch the binding onto the back of the quilt first, then we will flip it over and do a top stitch. So there's many different ways to do your binding. It's however you feel most comfortable. Today I'm going to show you the easiest way that I figured out, just so as you start, you can go through it. A lot of people might use an actual binding foot. They make them, it looks similar to this. I personally haven't tried it yet, but there's an option there where it kind of folds it over for you and you do it at the same time. A lot of people use binding clips, which are perfectly fine and helpful, and you can do it all together. I personally just like this method. I think it's easy and it gets pretty decent results. So what we're gonna do is take the pin out of your little roll, or just find the spot. I'd say take like 8 to 9 inches up and just pick a section on your quilt, and we are going to get started. So what you're going to do is bring your quilt in and over. You're just going to do that 1/4 inch seam again. If it's easier for you, you can pop out the clear. You're going to want the clear for the next step, but you can pop out the clear and put your 1/4 inch foot back on wherever it disappeared to in my little jar. Put your 1/4 inch foot back on. And what this is going to allow you to do is keep it right on the edge, so you have a perfectly trimmed seam. So we're going to start right here. My machine's still on 2.5. It does not need to be a bigger stitch for this. You may find that you want that if you have a lot of layers to go through, but with this thin of a batting, you can see I won't need it at all. So we're just going to start and go around. And as you go, you just kind of reline it up, stitch. So what we're doing basically, and I should mention, this is the raw edge of the binding because we're going to stitch it here, and then what we will do is fold the other piece around, and that's how you bind your quilt. Okay, I will see you back here in a minute, right before we hit the end of a corner, and I will show you how to do your corners. We're about to the end of the quilt. You can see here's the corner, and we need to figure out how we're going to do this corner situation. One thing I should briefly mention is under here is a stool. Sometimes this will get super heavy and will pull, so you can always put like a kitchen chair over and drape it over, have someone hold it. If you have a nice big table, now is the time to drape the quilt off over it, just so you distribute the weight a little bit more evenly, and it's easier in your arms and your shoulder for that night. So we are going to do this. I'm going to run my finger in the way that we do the stitch pattern, but what we are going to do is we're going to stitch down here, and we hit actually right about this point on the hexagon, which is ironic, but once we hit this little point, we are going to angle our needle and stitch right off the edge. And then we're going to fold, and I will show you how to do that fold, and then we are going to stitch up here. So let me show you how to angle off. I'd say it's about 1/4 inch if I was to measure it just with my fingers. And you want to make sure your presser foot is down. You pick up your presser foot, your needle is down, excuse me. You pick up your presser foot, you rotate it, angle, and stitch off. And then what you're going to want to do, ooh, we got messy threads. What you're going to do is clip this. Now we have came off, and we need to do the angle. So what we're going to do is, let me see if I can get a better angle. Okay. You have this as the edge. You're just going to rotate it up with your finger underneath here. And what you're looking to do is make a perpendicular line. What this looks like is almost like a hospital corner where it is just in reverse. And so under here, if we were to do x-ray vision, there'd be a fold right here. And then all you have to do is put this back under your needle and start up again. And that's how you do the corner. All right, keep doing all the other 3 corners, and I will meet you back right after your final corner, and I will show you how to connect your binding strips, and then we'll do the front. Nearing the end of the quilt, we're getting right back to our beginning place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop. You want to make sure you have enough to overlap. So if you'll see here, you're going to overlap, and then you're going to want to grab a ruler. This is my favorite one for this application because we're going to need to put it at 2 1/4. I will meet you over at the ironing board and we will go from there. One of the main questions is, okay, how do I know where to cut this binding and how do I attach it together so that we get one continuous strip and it's all flush and life is fantastic? Well, here's the trick that I learned years ago that has been a lifesaver, a godsend. It's basically, it's foolproof almost. So what you do is however wide your binding is, so in my case, remember it's 2 1/4 inches wide. So then what you do is wherever your overlap is, that is where you are going to measure to overlap your binding. So here's my salvage edge right here. So we're going to come in here and we're measuring 2 1/4, and then we're going to come up here to 2 1/4, and then what you need to do is come in. This is going to be an odd angle for me. Come in and just have some gumption. I'm going to move this just a little bit so you can see. Have some gumption. Come in, line it up, 2 1/4, make your cut. Now what you're going to need to do is we're going to do exactly what we did before. Right sides together, up here, just like this. You're going to come stitch along here and then trim your edge and voila, it'll come back perfectly. So I'm going to go do that and I will meet you back here. All right, we are ready to go. Now, sometimes I will pin this just because you're dealing with really tight tension and something really heavy on the other end. So it makes it very difficult. So we're just going to line up again. This time you want it to match. And actually, I would recommend, I just realized, cutting this off as you go because you want to not have that in yours, and mine might actually have a little tiny bit of it, but we'll catch it. I'll catch it on the side when it goes through. So we're going to line this up, get our edge all perfectly lined up, and we're just going to go right in. You want to take out your pin. There we go, and then it's the moment of truth. I always can't resist. I always can't resist. I always have to come in here, and then we hope for the best, and it did work. I'm going to show you. We have our seam stitched, and now we're going to check it out and look at it. I usually check it first before I trim, just to make sure that everything is good and right in the world. And I kind of equate this to pulling, you know, like a lava cake or fritters or something out of the oven. You want them to be just right and you hope they haven't fallen. That's kind of this moment. So then you open it up, stretch it, and look, it's going to lay perfectly fine. Now all we need to do is trim this just like you've trimmed all of your others. Just be extra careful that it's away from your quilt so you don't accidentally catch the back of your quilt. And then look, perfect. Now all you have to do is come back in here, stitch up the other edge, and then we're going to get sewing. I'm going to show you kind of a preview of what it's going to look like as we get going. So you're going to take the front of your quilt, and as we stitch around, you're just going to pull this over, line it up, and stitch. Ideally, you're going to be stitching right on this line again, so if you can kind of see it, you can kind of feel the groove. But that's where that 2 1/4 comes in handy because you have a little bit of leeway here, but you can get it right to where you want it. And then you're just going to keep going around. When you get to the corner, And we'll go through all of this too, but when you get to the corner, you're going to come around, and then all you're going to do is you're going to straighten this out into that angle again. You're going to pop it back around. Sometimes, and then ideally, you're going to start right here and keep going. Sometimes I will kind of throw a pin in just to make sure I get the tight corner, and then just keep going around. I'll meet you over at the machine so we can see it in action.